Folks, welcome into another episode of SportsBookReview.com's Roundtable Edition discussion. Today, we're going to talk a little NHL. Got my esteemed NHL panel today, Adam Booth, Chris Giannini, and also Ian Cameron. Every time we do some of these videos together, I think, the next time coming up, we're going to get some positive news. It doesn't seem like that's helping yet, but we're going to give you some news to help you get through. And if we do have an NHL season, you're going to be much better educated. Let's talk a little bit of NHL quarantine updates here, because obviously with all the sports, we're getting different levels. The NFL says, hey, business is planned. We're still going to start on time. We're going to have our draft. When you take a look at some of these other leagues, sometimes those alarm sounding flags are now popping up. I'm going to start with you and come in right here, Adam. Toronto Mayor John Tory says all major city events and event permits are canceled until June 30th as the number of COVID-19 cases continue to rise. Why is that an issue for the NHL? Why is that an issue for Toronto? Well, if we look today, guess who's in the playoffs? Those Toronto Maple Leafs. This could throw a wedge in a lot of things here, Adam.
Yeah, it could. And it's also followed with the NHL making a statement that players in the league and staff are meant to continue self-quarantine until April 15th. Now, the NHL, this is the third announcement they've made in 3 weeks, pushing it back a week at a time. I don't understand why they keep needing to make these breaks. We know we're not near a return. They could probably say, 60 days or 6 weeks or a month from now, just stay quarantined until the governments start to update things. Local governments, like the mayor, you said, start to make updates based on what the health officials are saying. There's no necessity for the NHL to sort of try to keep some sort of glasses half full take on it, where, okay, we're just going to push it back one more week when, we're not looking at sports returning anytime before June. So, yeah, it's a bit silly. Maybe they're just trying to. I mean, this week there was 4 cases confirmed for NHL players with 2 Avalanche, 2 Senators. The captain of the Avalanche, Landeskog, said that he's heard good things from the 2 players who are undisclosed about their health is returning and everything. So that's a positive take. I would rather the NHL focus on that sort of honest view than 1 week at a time. Oh, by the way, there's no more NHL next week for now. Players are going to stay self-quarantined. We know that. It's a bit silly.
Yeah, big updates on the horizon. We're all sports fanatics. We all like the NHL. We want the NHL to get back rolling. But we also want to do it safely. And also, we're fans. We want to be in the stands. We want to, cheer on our heroes out there on the ice. I'm going to bring you in now, Chris, to talk a little bit more on this, June 30th look from Toronto, because that could throw a lot of wrenches in a lot of things the NHL is trying to do, because we're not going over, let's just say, a national quarantine in Canada or a national quarantine in the United States. So some cities might say, hey, you know what? We're open for business. We want to play some hockey. When you have some other cities, Boston or Philadelphia, New York City for the New York Rangers, if they do make it in, depending on how some of these things shake out. But we're looking at some cities that say, hey, we want to play, other cities not. So would it be fair to say, Toronto can't go on June 30th and play? So if the NHL gets underway for the playoffs, let's just say June 20th, maybe forced on the road when they don't have to be. Crazy times here, Chris, right?
Yeah. Now we're all trying to predict the weather here, and it's really hard to do. But I think if any of these sports franchises want to get a playoff in and want to complete their season, being the NBA and the NHL, no difference, they're going to have to do some super creative problem solving. The NBA has talked about, just taking over a city like Vegas and saying, hey, we're just going to move all 30 teams here. We're going to put everybody else in a room, everybody who's clean and has been self-quarantined, and we know that they can pass, the test and they don't have this thing. We're going to get them in game shape, and we're just going to all live here. I think if the NHL wanted to do something sooner than June 30th, that's going to have to be their solution in order to get Toronto involved. And they're obviously a major player in this because they're going to be in the playoff conversation.
Ian, Canadians talking about Toronto there, saying you can't play any home games in Canada. Certainly going to be an uproar there. But I like to take shots at other pundits, Ian, especially on other, ESPN-type telecasts where they're saying, why don't we just get the Eastern Conference on one cruise ship and the Western Conference on another cruise ship and quarantine them and play? I mean, we are at our ends wit here, Ian, going over some scenarios that's saying, when can these sports come back? Take a look at the NHL. They're going to be proactive in this, but there are also some opportunities where after that announcement came out, Canadians right away go, going, wait a second, he said June 30th. That means we're out of the playoffs. Like, Toronto's not going to be in the playoffs. What gives? Then they sort of amended that statement and said, look, these are for new permits coming in. We're not talking about sports in general. Those can be adjusted. So if we do get some good movement here on the COVID-19 cure and it does die down, maybe we have the opportunity to open up in the Toronto arenas there and play NHL hockey without fans. That's a possibility. But we're talking about crazy times with crazy solutions, Ian.
Yeah, and that is an important distinction to make about the declaration and statement made by Toronto Mayor John Tory, that this does not include Scotiabank Arena, these closures of conferences and festivals and outdoor events such as that for the city of Toronto till the end of June. That's still going to be controlled by the Leafs, the Raptors, the basically the tenants of that arena, Scotiabank Arena, as well as the league overall. To me, this is not a situation where, okay, Toronto's closed down to June. They're all of a sudden going to be exodused and exiled out of the NHL while everyone else plays. I think this is a situation, especially seeing it unfold worldwide and especially in North America, Canada and the US, things are going to get a lot worse before they get better. This is going to be, we're all going to grab each other's hands. We're going to jump into the pool at the same time and nobody's going to be left back. I think that's the kind of thing we're going to see here with the NHL, with the NBA. If they're going to reopen these leagues, they're going to reopen these leagues with every team available to play and resume the season. That's all there is to it. And as far as I'm concerned with the you got people now with graphs and flow charts and little diagrams now saying, oh, this is the projection here. You saw it at the White House yesterday, what they were doing there with all the charts and the diagrams. And they're trying to give you paint some sort of picture in terms of a time estimate. And I'm going to say this, I've said it a million times to people I've talked to. You can't put a damn timetable on a pandemic. You can't do that. You know, It's going to play out the way it is. You know, we're going to have to wait and see how things are going. And I'm going to be Mr. Realist here. And it hurts to say this, but I'm not here to, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but I'm going to be a Debbie Realist here in this kind of situation. I think we're looking at July and August resumption, earliest case scenario for the NHL. And people, I know Kirk Herbstreit got ripped for saying NFL and college football may not start on time, saying what a moron, what an idiot. He has no idea what he's talking about. Well, he's a lead analyst in college football. He's pretty smart, actually. And I think he's well connected with people certainly in college football. And I'm sure he knows some people that work in the NFL as well, all those years at ESPN. This is not about trying to be sad or be depressive and just really bring everybody's spirits down. This is trying to be real about what's going on. This is going to be a long, painful, extended hiatus. This is hurting me right now. It does. I mean, these are sports that I love. These are sports that I use to make income. I can say that for all of you guys. We make income from doing this. It hurts that NHL is not around anymore. It crushed me that March Madness NCAA tournament was not around. I mean, it sucks. It's an absolutely brutal thought, and it's terrible to see what's happened. But you have to at some point separate what you want to hear from what is actually going on. And I think we're looking at an extended hiatus right now. And for NHL hockey, you got to start thinking over under August in terms of when this sport will resume.
I think Ian brings up a really good point here, Adam. I'm going to bring you back in and talk about a little bit of the NFL playoff structure, because I think we could probably agree. I don't think there's going to be a resume of the regular season and finish off the last half dozen games. I think their only shot to finish off would say, hey, you know what? Look, we're still a business here. We're going to try to get some funding to the teams that aren't going to make the playoffs or expected their gates to come in. But the NHL is going to resume a playoff structure. The only thing we have right now, hypotheticals, and I doubt they would want to impede on the next season coming up. So you might have one of those month and a half rushes where, let's say Ian says, they don't get resumed until July. We're looking at a playoff run and maybe an extended one, maybe a shorter one, 3-game series, 5-game series, maybe just the Stanley Cup final, can be 7-game series. Adam, talk about what you would like to see in a playoff structure and how it could possibly work and not affect the upcoming season here in 2020, 2021.
Yeah, I touched on that last week. It's the type of thing. I mean, Ian brought up I think a blogger wrote it. I forget his source for it, but it was that there would be a playoff that included everybody, and there would be a 1-game elimination, and then a 3-game, and then 5, and then you'd still get a best-of-7 final. I really like that idea, especially to help out those teams that are always not known as hockey markets, and your Arizonas and your Floridas, and Florida might make it this year, but definitely some teams that wouldn't be included in that conversation. I do like that idea, and you could still do it in the same time frame. I commented last week that there's no way we should be looking to start the next NHL season on time with the regular preseason and all that. What they should do is just accept the fact we're going to have a shortened season to 40 to 50 games next year, looking at January start date, same way they did in 2012, 2013, and then they can finish out the playoffs are the time everybody kind of gets excited for. It's the quality teams. You have a condensed season, but you can still salvage it and get quality hockey, and it's still a memorable year, as opposed to having this as a domino effect that affects many seasons to come. So that's the only way I see it returning. But I just wanted to comment briefly on your first question. I agree with what Ian's saying. This is not a surprising statement by the Toronto Mayor, and it will be with the NHL. Everybody returns or nobody returns. Even in like the creative brainstorm idea of we all move to one city, you would have to have everybody in a bubble, not coming into contact with anybody in Vegas. It's not very realistic. So why don't we just accept the fact that we're going to have to deal with the circumstances for now, and the quicker people take it seriously, the quicker the sports will resume in their best element, even if it's a shortened season.
Chris, when we talk about shortened seasons in all sports, I mean, a lot of the times the guys are bringing up some good points here, saying, hey, look, sometimes we just want to fast forward to the playoffs as is because that's the crux of it. That's where we get in. Now, there's a lot of teams that would still like some gate. I mean, there's some wild things out there where even the teams that aren't in the playoffs, you match them up almost seeding in a one-game home team playoff for take-all to see if they can get in the playoffs into like a three-game series with the 6th, 7th race seed. There's a lot of stuff going around. In your estimation there, Chris, if you're the commissioner of the NHL, what do you think would work here with the playoff structure? What could be fun for us?
If it was my decision to be made, I like the idea of expanding the playoffs a little bit, maybe adding 4 more teams that are kind of bubble teams that we think if we finish the season out would get in. If you're going to make it an NCAA March Madness type thing for the first couple of rounds, I'm not a fan of that because a hot goalie could realistically take out the number 1 seed in a 1-game playoff winner all. Yeah. And I don't know that the 30th team
Detroit
or the 20th
over Tampa
team,
Bay.
yeah, should deserve to knock out, somebody who did play the bulk of the season and earn this spot that quickly. But I do like the concept of those added expanded teams. Listen, baseball did a 1-game play-in for their wild card, and it turned out to be one of the most exciting things baseball has ever done. I know that these games are made to be played in series, but if you add it, the 7 versus the 10 or the 12 seed in a side and so on and so forth, and seed at the bottom half that way and let them play 1-game tournament style, and then you get into a playoff, I'm okay with that. I'm great with that because you've got bubble teams that might play their way in if we played the season out, and teams in the middle that might have fallen out. So everybody still has a shot at the cup. That deservedly gets the shot at the cup based on how they played the bulk of the season.
You know, it's interesting too, Ian, when you bring up, obviously we always like to talk about the business end of things. Like you can't just snap your fingers. A lot of these arenas are built for 320, 330 days out of the year that they're already in use with concerts and conventions. You can't just say, hey, you know what, we're just going to take over, because you know who else is looking to take over those buildings at that time? The NBA as well. A lot of logistics would have to go into it. Let's just say, Ian, best case scenario, right? Teams get on the ice June 15th, have a quick 2-week, trial base, trying to get in, work it out, get the logistics done, and then by July 1st, we're ready to go, putting into a playoff that theoretically you probably would like to be done before September or before Labor Day that year. What are some fun topics we can use, or how they can actually get that done here, Ian?
Yeah, that's amazing how things can change in a week. I mean, we're talking June 15, maybe a training camp just a week ago, and now we're looking like that's looking more and more like that's not going to be possible just a week later. And for the NHL, this really hurts, this hiatus. It hurts the NBA too, but for the NHL, so much of their revenue comes from television, and they don't have those games right now. And the NBA has infinitely more revenue streams coming in and from different areas and different facets of the business than the NHL does. So for Gary Bettman, and Adam mentioned what the NHL is doing in terms of every 2 weeks updating this situation and keeping the hiatus and the isolation going. The reason he's only updating it every 2 weeks instead of every month is because he's desperate as can be to get this league going again because of the revenue, and especially with the television. side of things that's lost because of no games. As far as the playoff format, we talked about it in the last video we did about the format being discussed, where they do incrementally larger playoff rounds. They'd start in the first round with a single elimination, second round best of 3, third round best of 5, and then you get to the conference semifinals and beyond, it would be best of 7. I like that idea. What I don't like is the 31 teams, all 31 teams being involved. That I don't like. I can't condone Detroit Red Wings being in the playoffs. I'm sorry. That's been one of the historically worst regular seasons going, known to man in NHL history. I can't condone that being an NHL playoff team as far as I'm concerned. But I'd like Chris's idea, the concession here. 20 teams, 24 teams, shrink that number down a little bit. Include the teams that were just on the outside looking in going into this hiatus. Florida, New York Rangers, Vancouver Canucks, Minnesota Wild in the Western Conference. Some of those teams, get them in the mix. Do the incremental playoff format. I think that's something that would work. But you can't do 31 teams. You can't reward Detroit Red Wings for a great season because it's been a historically worse season. And what are we going to do? We're going to reward them for being a playoff team? Can't do that, in my opinion. And one thing I want to note about doing these games in neutral.
They did the worst teams play for draft lottery spots. Like the last 6 teams in the league had a little round robin. I don't know. Because I do think that some of the weaker teams in the league are the ones that are going to struggle the most with financing what's going on. What do you think about something like that?
Yeah, I agree with that as well. They might try to do it to help the teams out that are, dealing with some financial strain. Just try a way to get them some playoff gates, some playoff revenue for sure. I like these people in the NBA and other sports, maybe even the NHL has talked about neutral sites for a playoff round. It's hilarious to hear that. I hear the NBA talking about Midwest. Let's do something. Let's take over some campus in the Midwest. Like this virus just has some force field. It's not going to come across a certain state all of a sudden. Like it's absolutely asinine. You got to get it right. You got to do it the normal way. I don't talk about these cockamamie ideas. Let's go to the Barbados. Let's go to some little Loyola Chicago campus in the Midwest and try to get this thing going again. Stop, will you please? Do it right or don't do it at all.
Yeah.
It's amazing to talk about all this stuff here with the NHL, but we do have time constraints that we have to use. There's a lot more NHL talk coming up here on sportsbookreview.com. Make sure you hit that subscribe button each and every day. Those notifications delivered right to your box so you can be up to date on when the NHL is going to resume. For Adam, Chris, and Ian, I'm Donnie. Thank you for tuning in for another NHL episode of the Roundtable right here on sportsbookreview.com.